Greetings of the day. In this lecture, we are going to see John Keats. John Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn. So, as we have seen John Keats' life in the previous lectures, here I will give you a brief note on his life and his work. John Keats, the second generation romantic poet whose lifespan between 1795 to 1821. English romantic poet John Keats was born on October 31, 1795 in London. Though he lost his parents at an early age and he had three siblings too. And he studied medicine at a London hospital and he became a licensed apothecary at 1860. Keats also began associating with artists and writers, among them Leigh Hunt, who published Keats' first poems in his journal, The Examiner. Within a few years, the poet experienced the first symptoms of tuberculosis, the disease that had killed his mother and brother. He continued his writing and reading the great works of literature. He also fell in love with Fanny Brown, a neighbor's daughter, though his poor health and financial difficulties made marriage impossible. He published a final work, Lamia, Isabella, The Eve of St. Agnes, and the other poems, which included his famous odes and the unfinished narrative Hyperion, a fragment. Keats traveled to Italy in 1820 in an effort to improve his health, but died in Rome the following year at the age of 26. So Keats' lifespan is very short, and he has written number of poems, especially odes, during his very short lifespan. The one we have here is Ode on a Grecian Urn. Look at the picture, Ode on a Grecian Urn. The picture of urn, actually the similar kind of picture, the one Keats explained here, the urn which has immortal paintings on it, which he has explained in his poem. The similar kind of thing you can see in this picture. Let's see the poem Ode on a Grecian Urn. This poem actually opens with three consecutive metaphors, the implied rather than directly stated. Comparison between the urn the speaker is viewing and respectively a bride of quietness, a foster child of silence, and slow time, and a sylvan historian. You can see the lines of the poem, right? Though still unravished bride of quietness, though foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than a rhyme. What leaf-fringed legend haunts about the shape of deities or mortals, or of both, in temp or the dates or the dales of Arcady? What men or gods are these? What maiden sloth? What made what mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild ecstasy? So in this line, in this stanza, what would we understand? Keats has used three different, three consecutive metaphors, right? The first is bride of quietness, a foster child of silence and slow time, and a sylvan historian. So when you see these three, the last is perhaps easiest for the reader to immediately comprehend. Ancient Grecian urns were commonly illustrated with scenes or subjects that varied depending on the era and style in which a given urn was created. While more ancient vessels featured paintings of war and heroic deeds. The one Keats had in mind probably came from the early freestyle period. Urns of this era are characterized by scenes from religious and musical ceremonies similar to the ones described throughout Ode on a Grecian urn. Because of its subject matter, Keats' urn must date to before the 4th century BC, right? At the it depicts, you know, the it depicts preserved through the millennia. For this reason, the urn reveals to the viewer a leaf fringed a bit of history, but as a Sylvan historian, right? So, in this thing, Keats actually experienced, illustrates the most important thing, that is the three consecutive metaphors. So, more puzzling to readers are the first two metaphors because we have already explained the third one, why he has returned, the Sylvan historian. Probably this urn which he had in his mind was, painted before 4th BC, 4th century BC. Right? More puzzling to readers are the first two metaphors. Each involves the idea of quietness or silence. That's what he has implied, that bride of quietness, a foster child of silence. Both actually, you know, illustrates the same thing, quietness or silence, because the urn relates a story in pictures rather than words. But why is it a bride of quietness and a foster child of silence and slow time? The later, maybe because while the urn's creation was the result of a fertile union between an ancient artist and some experience that informed his work, the same artist is now long forgotten and the experience long ended. So the urn, that's the urn. His child has fallen into the custody of the ages, that is slow time. People who look at the urn can imagine but cannot actually hear the musical sounds and the story it depicts. Moreover, while in its own day the urn was used by people in their everyday lives, it has since become an artifact, perhaps in a museum, that viewers inspect reverentially in silence. So, the most cryptic meaning in these lines is the word still. Is it an adjective suggesting the urn is unmoving, or an adverb meaning not yet deflowered or ravished? A dual intent seems to fit the poem the best. While unmoving suggests the urn's static condition as an artifact, not yet defiled, suggests that its beauty, though still present after thousands of years, will one day be destroyed. This points directly to a major theme of the poem, the painful knowledge that all things must pass, including beauty. Though the urn is an ancient, might seem eternal, in fact, it remains subject to decay and destruction, subject to time, even if in case of antiquity, it seems to be a slow time. The urn's perishability is made apparent by a simple understanding. One of beauty's qualities is that it is rare. Though Many urns were created, only few survive. And while this contributes to the speaker's conception that the urn is uncommon and therefore most striking, there is also evidence that even ancient relics are not immune to time. So when you see the lines 5 to 10, the poem's dualities are further expressed in this sestet. First, while the urn seems both unchanging and perishable, the questions its pictures raise suggest both eternal and mortal. So though the urn expresses a flowery tale, as expressed in the line 4, the tale itself is unclear in many ways. You can see the line 4 here, a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. So the tale is not expressed here clearly. Observing the figures painted on the urn's surface, the speaker cannot tell whether they are deities or mortals. It's unclear whether they exist in Apollo's valley of Thames or the heaven-like but mortally inhabited region of Arcady. The characters may be men or gods. They cannot be both. As the speaker's repeated question demonstrate, he is unsure in his interpretation. Further, though the urn is marked by stillness and silence, the activities it depicts are filled with motion and sound, a mad pursuit, pipes and timbrels, wild ecstasy. Though the speaker cannot hear the music, he can see the instruments. Though he cannot see the motion, the still representations force him to imagine it. Thus, the urn possesses a dual nature. On the one hand, it is itself a symbol of the static quality of art. On the other hand, however, its painted figures represent the dynamic process of life, which art distills in slow time and often in silence. This is the puzzling nature of all art. Its viewer responds to it both as a work which seems eternal and as an experience which he knows to be fleeting. Though he pursues meaning the way the males in the painting pursue the females, the meaning is loath, to yield itself. In such a way, the urn has a teasing nature that brings about more questions than answers. For if the answers were easily available, then art itself would have little reason to exist. When you see the line 11 to 14, right? When you see the heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. The full ace of pipes play on, not to the sensual air, but more endeared. Pipe to the split ditties of no tone, fair youth, beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal, yet do not grieve. She cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss. Forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. When you see the lines from 11 to 14 in the second stanza, the speaker turns wholly to the sounds and activities depicted on the urn. Here he makes the distinction between ideal nature of art and the flawed, fleeting nature of life. Though he cannot physically hear the melodies the urn's characters play, those unheard are sweeter because they exist in the Platonic world of abstract forms. They are perfect precisely because they are unheard, because the spirit to which they appeal can grant them an imagined flawlessness impossible in songs perceived by the sensual air, to which they appeal can grant them an imagine flawless, impossible in songs perceived by the sensual air. If life forces imperfection on all things, art retains the ability to make. As Keats wrote in one of his letters, all disagreeables evaporate. One such disagreeable is time. In life, where chronology is the rule, even the sweetest tunes must be brief. In art, however, the soft pipes can play on forever. Yet, there is a paradox. What makes music both recognizable and beautiful in its tonal quality? The urns musicians, however, play ditties of no tone, while these songs may be ideal in their abstraction. They cannot possess the beauty of the real songs, whose tones, however flawed, have at some point pleased the speaker's sensual ear and instilled in him the idea of musical perfection. So when you see the lines 15 to 20, by the sestet of the second stanza, the word's treatment of time, the tension between the perishable and the eternal, the static and the dynamic, the earned stillness, the characters, struggle and pursuit has resolved itself into the three central symbols of the poem. The trees which represent nature, the song which represents art, and the bold lover who represents the most basic process of human existence, fertility. In life, time takes its toll in each of these areas. Nature changes, going through its seasonal cycles of death and regeneration. Art stems from both nature and the experience of life. But it does so in a way that while more lasting is actually neither. Finally, life in all its splendor is dictated by time. It is chronological and its moments, such as those of love and desire, are transient, mutable, and therefore less perfect than either art or nature. On the urn, however, time is stilled. The melodist can't not leave thy song. The trees can never be bare, and the lovers are fated to remain eternally as they are depicted. Right? They cannot get the age cannot be there. Midway in the process of the chase, filled with wild ecstasy, but never able to consummate their desires. But again, there is a paradox. Though the lovers are captured forever in a moment of supreme beauty, the moment before they are apt to be disappointed. They are also abstracted from the process of life. For life depends on fertility, the reason for the chase in which they are engaged. The lovers are in fact infertile through apostrophe or the direct addressing of the inanimate, bold lover. The speaker hints at the paradox. Do not grieve, he says, at the lover because abstract and not alive is an incapable of grief as he is ever winning near the goal. Grief is the negative side, life's process, the painful result of love. Only living fertile lovers can feel the weariness, fever and fret brought on by time. And while the speaker tries to imagine that the timeless world of the urn is the perfection of life, his observation suggests it is in fact the opposite of life and that his attempt must in the end be doomed. Right? Fair youth beneath the trees, those canst not leave their song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal, yet do not grieve. She cannot fade, though thou hast not the bliss. Forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. So we understand from the meaning of the word Greek what Keats actually expresses. Right. So when you see the next lines, that is from 21 to 30, while the second stanza establishes the three central symbols of the poem, there is as yet no order to them. Oh, happy, happy boughs that cannot shed your leaves nor ever bid the spring adieu. And happy melodist, unwearied, forever piping songs forever new. More happy love, more happy, happy love. Forever warm and still to be enjoyed. Forever panting and forever young. All breathing human passion for above that leaves a heart high, sorrowful, and cloyed, a burning forehead and a parching tongue. So, when the second stanza establishes the three central symbols of the poem, there is as yet no order to them. They exist together in the same type of wild ecstasy as the lovers chase. So, in the third stanza, however, the speaker clearly delineates a hierarchy among nature, art, and life. This order is expressed in the first three couplets of the stanza, each addressing one of the three symbols. First is nature. If it is happy, then art. Here, songs must also be happy since art reflects nature. If art is happy, then life, here love, is happy since art also expresses experience. But what is meant by happy? So some readers might think the repetition of the word to be excessive, a sign that the speaker is trying too hard to believe in what he is saying. But we must turn to the other poem, Ode to a Nightingale, which similarly addresses the tension between time and experience to understand the way in which Keats uses the word. So in that poem, the speaker's heart aches for the nightingale's happiness expressed in its song. The bird's happiness is not of the human variety. However, it is the happiness that comes from lacking the ability to think and therefore to be aware of time, change, and death. It is the happiness of nature which the speaker possessing human consciousness cannot share. This is what creates his ache. Though he wishes to fully identify with the nightingale, to fade with its into nature, he is incapable of feeling the bird's sense of immortality, their real meaning of happiness. So we must suspect the word bears the same sense in wood on a Grecian urn. Like the nightingale, the urns abstract beings. Their natural world and their artistic expression exist outside of time, or therefore immortal. The speaker comes closest to identifying in, longs to be a part of, you know, with the happiness in the third stanza, his repetition of the word. As in Ode to a Nightingale, the experience overtakes him. He realizes he is detached from the urn's world he longs to be a part of. And the poem's tone shifts from ecstasy to alienation. Thus, the lover's passion exists far above in the world of ideas rather than of life. The speaker's heart aches as it does in the presence of Nightingale, but is high, sorrowful, and cloyed. His physical presence, the reminder that he is not abstract but real, enters the poem for the first time. A burning forehead and a parching tongue. So, after approaching the world of the urn, therefore, he quickly drops away from it and is left to reflect on the significance of the experience. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar, O mysterious priest, leadest thou that heifer lowing at the skies, and all her silken flanks with garlands dressed? What little town by river or seashore? A mountain built with peaceful citadel is emptied of this foe, this fierce moan. A little town, thy streets for evermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can ever return. So in these lines, lines 31 to 40, in the fourth stanza, the scene on the urn changes, perhaps implying that the speaker has moved to the other side of the vessel. The shift in subject matter suggests the poem's urn may in fact be a composite of different artifacts, the poet observed. Freestyle urns of the type Keats seems to describe generally depict only one scene, that running continuously around the circumference. The new scene shows the priest leading a heifer to sacrifice at some green altar, not portrayed. Having come to the end of his attempt to identify with the secular bucolic bliss of the lovers in the first three stanzas, having been left, in fact, high sorrowful in the process, the speaker searches the urn for a different kind of immortality. Beyond the fleeting passions of life and the abstract perfection of art, exists religion which attempts to synthesize nature, symbol, and experience within a single overriding principle. Yet, the urn's religious significance offers no more comfort than its eternal lovers, represented by a mysterious priest of a spiritual practice long dead. The urn's religion has itself become art, eternal but eternally abstract. Lacking the proper context to understand the meaning of the priest's sacrifice, the speaker feels as desolate as the town emptied of this folk. So thus the predominant mood of the poem has become melancholic. Its shift embodied by the emptiness and silence of the town. This silence is really the silence of the universe when religion becomes an antique articraft rather than a means of understanding the high romance. So Keats talked about in When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be. Right? And the final stanza, woe Attic shape, fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought, with forest branches and the trodden weed. Though silent form does tease us out of thought, as doth eternity cold pastoral. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woo than ours, a friend to man to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth beauty. That's all. Ain't no on earth the all ye need to know. Very famous lines, beauty is truth, truth beauty. So by the final stanza from lines 41 to 45, the urn has lost much of its vitality for the speaker. It is reverted from a bride, foster child, and historian, as he has explained in the first stanza, all human personification to its objective identity and Attic shape. The characters are transformed from living beings to artistic renderings. As such, they are overwrought either by the artist who has portrayed them as larger than life or by the speaker who has elevated them to a significance they cannot possess. This term recalls the first stanza where the characters were overwrought in a different way with desire and ecstasy. This duality is part of the overall riddle the urn has become. Instead of granting meaning, it instead serves to tease us out of thought. Though being what divides us from nature and eternity, what gives us the sense of our own mortality and dooms us to the world of weariness, fever, and fret. But the speakers suggest we can be teased only briefly, and even then, our deception is the product of our imagination rather than of a cold piece of pottery. When the deception is ended, we return to reality disillusioned. As a speaker of Ode to a Nightingale concludes, the fancy cannot cheat so well or as she is famed to do deceiving it. So from the line 46, from line 46 to 50, again, the urn has become a riddle to the speaker. The final two lines are equally puzzling to the reader. The urn says to man, beauty is truth, truth, beauty, which makes sense in terms of the urn's world. For the lovers and for the urn itself, beauty is the only measure of existence. They cannot conceive as humans do that in life, beauty is often deceptive and truth often ugly. But for the speaker, the first five lines of the stanza seem to confirm his understanding that beauty has its false side. The truth of life, the suffering of men, the atrocities of history certainly demonstrate that what we know to be real can only occasionally be called beautiful. So, what do we make of the last line and a half? Some commentators insist that the words after the dash are part of the urn's message. The punctuation has been omitted, leading to easy misinterpretation. However, it seems unlikely that in a poem as controlled as Ode on a Grecian urn, Keats would have left such a glaring flaw in such a crucial point. So, other readers suggest that last words are the speakers and that he is addressing the reader. Thus, the urn's message comprises all that people need to know on earth, all they need to know, yet this reading seems to contradict the entire rest of the poem. So the speaker recognizes, after all, that he has only been teased into the believing that the urn's beauty is truth, and that what passes for truth in the urn's rarefied world can hold also true in life. For the urn and its characters, beauty is truth because they do not exist beyond the unthinking state of nature. Not only is the urn on earth, it is made of earth. It is like the nightingale, a part of nature. But for humans, truth is not limited to beauty. It is all we need to know because of human consciousness. We do not exist solely on earth. We perceive the abstract, the ideas drawn from the urn by the speaker, and we perceive the greater mystery, the high romance, which places us beyond earth. Further, our awareness of time and death forces us to search for truth beyond beauty, which can exist as truth only in the timeless world of the urn. So thus the tone of the final line seems one of mild remonstration, similar to cold pastoral. For the urns, having attempted to tease the speaker into believing a truth only appropriate to the urn itself. So, the very important themes of this poem are time. The main thing that captures the speaker's attention about this urn is that the figures on it are frozen in time in the middle of what they were doing and will remain there unchanged for eternity. So that is what the major theme. And then art and experience, right? Love. So these are the very important themes here discussed in this poem. So when you are going to write an assignment, you have to mention the varieties of themes expressed by Keats in this poem, Ode on a Grecian Urn. Also, you can mention the historical context of ode, historical context of urn, that Grecian urn, right? So these are the very important thing. So as I have explained, line by line explanation of the poem, you can also relate some of the meanings and some of the themes to get a full understanding of the poem. You can read the poem at least one or two times to understand the beauty of nature, the beauty of history, the beauty of earth, the beauty of time, the beauty of art represented, created by the poet John Keats. Thank you. We'll meet in the next lecture.